Hey, guess what? I don't train legs pretty much ever. And not only that, there are plenty of other muscles that I don't really ever need to train because I do this workout 4 days a week. Posterior chain is not a term commonly heard in the exercise universe, and yet it's one of the most important parts of the body to train when it comes to speed, endurance, and overall mobility and fitness. The posterior chain, if you're wondering, is your glutes, your hamstrings, and your erector spinae, which is to say your lower back. The most common form of cardio for people to do, which would be running, and then the second place would be cycling, which is more or less the same thing, just uses your quads and your glutes. Not really so much your hams, I mean a little bit to an extent, not so much your calves, and to a very, very limited extent, your lower back. Common leg exercises, such as squats and deadlifts, get a bit more of the posterior chain, but they don't really count as cardio, so they can only cover so much of all the exercising that you need to do each day. This workout, however, gets your quads and your entire posterior chain, your calves, some other muscles to an extent, and most importantly, also hits your cardio. You can get your cardio workout in and your leg workout in all at once. And it saves an immense amount of time. This thing kept me fit all throughout 2 off seasons so far. And despite only doing this for 8 minutes a day, when the season starts to 2.5-hour practices, I feel fine. Now, this workout is based on having a proper wrestling stance. And most people don't really understand very well what that is. So I'm just going to go over it for you real quick right now. There are plenty of other videos you can find online about how wrestling stance works. Even if you're not going to be wrestling yourself, it's pretty useful to know how to do wrestling stance, because stance motion is just so useful for overall mobility and fitness. First element of wrestling stance is you literally just squat. Just do a squat, and then put your hands in front of you like this. And then you just sit here. And you're like, what? That's stupid simple. And yes, wrestling stance is actually very stupid simple. But people don't do it well, because sitting like this, with your back straight, for a long time, gets uncomfortable. Why? Because it's using these lower back muscles right here, and people don't like using those. That's why people will be here, especially in JV, they'll be like, I'm in wrestling stance. No, you're not. You're in universal athletic stance. You're in baseball stance. You're in football stance. This is wrestling stance. In a wrestling match, whoever's lower wins. Guys will actually legit get on the ground and start crawling at you, because that way they're just lower than you are. It's definitely going to be uncomfortable at first, but maintaining that back flat, not like this, staying low, and keeping your arms in front of you, which is more or less as difficult as keeping your arms up in a boxing match. Like, it sounds easier than it is, but it will eventually build that shoulder endurance, build that lower back endurance, that posterior chain, and you're just going to feel so much better throughout your daily life if you learn to stay in a proper stance, rather than being like, what are you talking about? I'm in wrestling stance. Besides for the actual stance itself, another important aspect is the footwork. This is something you really just got to get a feel for. I got a feel for it wrestling. If you're not going to be wrestling, you can watch videos on footwork or watch wrestling matches yourself. But it's pretty much more or less like this. It's very simple. You just need to get a feel for it. If you're moving around in general, you don't know how to move, I usually like to take a step back and then bounce forward off that back foot. Boom. You know? Step back, plant my toes, boom. Push off immediately. It's generally best to do this workout in a generally pretty soft-ish area. I do it here on my living room carpet, which is pretty thin. It doesn't need to be that soft unless you're doing it really crazy hard and honestly probably doing it very wrong. To get into the actual workout, it's based around 2 if you do it like I do, very central wrestling motions. The first motion, the simplest and easiest one for pretty much anybody to do, if you can't do this, you're really, really out of shape, is the down block. So a down block is literally just you're in stance. There's 2 different ways to do it. The first is, say somebody tries to snap you down, look up snap down wrestling online if you don't know what I'm talking about. And then you just boom, to the ground, hands out in front of you, like boom. And then you just pop back up. If your opponent is pulling you forward on the snap down instead of just down, which any good opponent is going to do, it might look more like. The other way is just boom. Just in stance, boom. Boom. Like that. You kick your leg back, put down the other arm, and this can easily lead into a sprawl if you need to. This movement is very good for beginners to this workout who are just working on their stance, because you can do these without really ever fully leaving your stance. And they're a lot easier to do generally. The second major motion is the sprawl. This is also something that you can find online, tutorials of how to do, but it's a very simple motion. You're in stance, and then pretend say your opponent goes in on a shot. You just throw your legs back and get your hips as heavy as possible, heavy on your hips. Coach always hammers that into my head. Basically, you want to end up like this. Imagine your opponent goes for a shot, boom, and then you pop up as quickly as possible. This is not a burpee. You are not jumping down, doing a push-up, and then hopping up. The way you get up from a sprawl, as you put your arms down and get your hips heavy, then you get up, you just squeeze your core and just heave your legs forward. Now the last, most important, and also probably the most difficult motion is the shot itself. I really recommend looking up online shot tutorials. There are so many that you can find, and they're really very, very useful. Basically, it goes heel, toe, knee. Step out, your penetration step. Step on your heel. Toe. Knee. As you're coming in on your penetration step, you generally want your head to be pretty low. You don't actually want your knee to touch the ground if you can. I'm just doing it right now. Follow what I say, not what I do. And then you slide this knee forward. And as you do, you don't stay here and then slide forward while still with your head crouched down and everything and your back bent. Because then you get stuffed. You go heel, toe, and then boom, bring your hip forward. This not only helps you when you're wrestling, because then you can like drive across, but this helps in terms of the workout, because as you bring that hip forward, then you're really getting your posterior chain, you're getting your hams, your glutes, your lower back actually working on that movement rather than just your quads. The way this exercise might look for a beginner is you're just moving around in your stance, working on your footwork, throw in some down blocks, you snap, boom, and then just throw in some shots, some sprawls, whatever you want to do. It's a little bit harder to keep yourself accountable, I guess, with this exercise, because you need to modulate your intensity by just deciding how frequently you're going to do any of these movements, and a movement might be harder or less hard for you. I generally recommend setting a kind of loose, I'm going to do a shot / sprawl / down block, whatever it may be, once every 5 seconds, 3, 7, whatever it may be that works best for you. And this workout can range from very unintense to very intense, depending on how you do it. For example, the way I do it, I'll split it into groups. I do it for 8 minutes total. I'll do like a group of shots, sprawling like this at the end of each shot. And then I'll do a group of just sprawls over and over again in a circle like that. And then I'll do a group of like penetration step, sprawl, sprawl, spin. Penetration step, sprawl, sprawl, spin. And that works very well for me because I'm already, very, very much used to wrestling motions. I'm a wrestler. So I do it like that without any breaks, so to speak, where I'm just like moving around in stance, doing my down blocks and whatnot, because I've just moved beyond that point. And that also works because I'm doing it a bit of a shorter time, just 8 minutes. I used to do it for 13 minutes. Then I had to like go around and stance a bit at some points because I just couldn't keep up the intensity that I do it with for 13 whole minutes. And that brings us into a very important question. What kind of duration and what kind of intensity should you do this workout for? This depends on what you're trying to train for and how fit you currently are and how used you are to these kinds of movements. But generally speaking, I don't recommend going that much beyond 8 minutes. Like if you're reaching 8 minutes, around there is when I'd say start increasing the intensity rather than the length of time. You might even start before then, depending on what you're training for. Keep in mind, if you increase the intensity rather than the time, it's going to be more anaerobic, and you're going to be getting more of your muscles in there rather than just your cardio. You're not just your legs and your glutes and your lower back, but also core and shoulders, even a little bit of chest and tris, depending on how intense you do it. I do it intensely enough for long enough that it does end up being a little bit of that, but it's not like a chest and tris workout. But your shoulders and your core definitely do also get worked a bit. While the longer you do it for, the more aerobic it's going to be. Although I've personally found 8 minutes at a decent intensity to be fairly aerobic as well. I've gone from doing this workout for 4 or 5 days a week to doing 2.5-hour wrestling practices and just been fine, not been gassing out or anything. 8 minutes is not set in stone. I used to do 13 minutes and that also worked as well, but I just think 8 minutes generally works better because it gets such a good mix of muscles, aerobic, and anaerobic. whereas 13 minutes was mainly aerobic with like a little bit of muscles because they were just getting so exhausted. But it was such a long-term thing that it's not really as useful. Now, how frequently should you do this workout? When you're just beginning this workout, let's be honest, most of you watching this video are probably not used to these kinds of movements. I would recommend only doing this workout a few times a week at most, with a break in between each of them. I do recommend doing cardio very frequently. You know, I do cardio 5 days a week. Cardio is the most important thing when it comes to working out, and that's why I love this workout, because it's just cardio and legs, a little bit of core and shoulders mixed together, so it's just incredibly efficient and saves a ton of time. As soon as you can, I recommend working up to around 4 to 5 days a week of doing this. I know to most gym bros it sounds crazy, the idea of doing 4 to 5 days a week of something that counts as cardio. And also, aren't you supposed to blast your legs on one specific leg day every single week like we've all been told? I don't know. It's worked for me. I don't ever lift for legs, ever. I just do this and I run. And I'm not a big guy. I'm like 145. And with a hex bar deadlift, I've done 310 for reps. And on just that workout plan, my quads look like this. Again, not incredibly huge for an upper leg, but you know, I'm just 16 going on 17. And it already looks like this just from this training with no other leg work at all. That's why I believe that you as well should start this training program, because it gets the posterior chain that people so often neglect, gets the entire leg, and it also gets your cardio as well, saves an enormous amount of time. Just as a little bonus for extra cardio, I often do some explosive burners, so to speak, at the end of these workouts for just extra explosive cardio after the more long-term cardio that I do beforehand. Generally, I do a mix of just sprawls in place, which is, just over and over again as quickly as I can, usually for around 45 seconds. And the main thing that I do is I do what I call wrestling burpees, which is essentially a burpee without the push-up. You just sprawl, get your hips heavy, and then you come here, and once you're here, you just, and then you do a tuck jump, or you can also do a frog jump, which is what I do. So I just boot. And what I basically think of it as is I smack my hands with my ankles. And that will just about wrap things up for our workout today.